Welcome to Grueling Truth Show, Real Deal. I'm one of the hosts. I'm Josh Benjamin here with my co-host, Patrick Miller. Patrick, why don't you give the audience a shout-out? How you doing?
What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody had a good holiday weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully you had a great April Fool's, more importantly. No, I'm just joking. A great Easter with your family and friends. But hopefully you had a relaxing weekend. Our show talks about various sports topics. If you're new to the show, you can catch our show on our website, thegruelingtruth.net, and tons of other media places. And I'm just going to go through this real quick. Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Music, iTunes. If you go to the App Store, if you have an iPhone, you can get our Grueling Truth Sports Network app and listen to our show. Flipboard, Google News, iHeartRadio, all those good things. Just search Grueling Truth. You can find our show, Real Deal. You can follow me on Twitter at CoachJB4. You can also follow Patrick at Miller_Patrick4. You can also follow us on there as a Real Deal show at Real Deal TGT. And then, of course, on Facebook with the other social media piece, The Real Deal. You can find us on there. Or you can also search our names, Josh Benjamin and Patrick Miller, and be friends with us on there, or so-called friends. So tonight's topic, it's kind of really negative, to be honest with you. And I don't know how else to put it, but Cincinnati fans have it rough. Whatever fan you are, as far as what sport, whether it's the Cincinnati Bengals, the Reds, the Cincinnati Bearcats, any sport, football, basketball, the main one, Xavier basketball, just so many treacherous times where things could have went the other way in a positive way, or at least half of these could have went in a positive way. And I think Cincinnati fans in general would be happy, but they all didn't. And now we're sitting here and we're going to talk about how bad the Cincinnati fans got it. And we have a top 10 list with a couple honorable mentions, and we're going to just jump right into it. Patrick, go ahead and start with one of our honorable mentions.
So the first honorable mention that we will talk about is on December 11th, the Crosstown Shootout Brawl. And if anybody can remember this, it was definitely a huge eyesore in the Cincinnati area, as University of Cincinnati and Xavier University is one of the biggest college basketball rivals. I believe if you go to the game and you feel the atmosphere, it ranks up there with your Dukes, North Carolinas. I wouldn't put it quite above it, but it's definitely around there. And it's always a heated battle. It's always chippy. There's always words exchanged. There's always taunting. There's always trash talking. And this one kind of got a little bit out of hand for the Cincinnati fans and the players as well. There was a record 6 technical fouls called in this game, and towards the end of the game, there was a couple words exchanged, different things that happened, and it ultimately ended with Yancey Gates, one of the University of Cincinnati basketball players, basically throwing, for lack of a better terms, if you've seen the video, a haymaker and connecting with one of the Xavier players. Ultimately, there were 8 players suspended due to this brawl, and just a real eyesore. After this as well, it was moved. It used to be home at Xavier and then go back to UC, back and forth year after year. I believe for the next 3 to 4 years, they changed it to neutral site, and the game was then played at US Bank Arena to eliminate the hostile environments of playing at each other's places. That has since changed. They have now gone back to playing it 1-1 every year, going from Xavier to Cincinnati. They also changed the name of it from Crosstown Shootouts. They changed the name to Crosstown Classic. I believe that has not changed back, but when something like this happens, it's definitely not good in the Cincinnati sports world.
So basically, we made Cincinnati even worse because we fought with each other instead of, trying to be better, and it embarrassed all of us even more so as Cincinnati fans. It ended obviously badly. So crosstown shootout got changed because they thought shootout was a negative term, or do you have any idea why that was changed, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it's due to the connotation of shootout going in a negative connotation. I think that's why, and I believe there's articles out there that have supported that from the change. So, but yeah, I definitely think that was the reason for it. Shootout obviously referring to things that are not positive and violent acts. So
it probably should have been called the Crosstown Punch-Out. I don't know if anybody ever played the Mike Tyson Punch-Out game in Nintendo.
Yeah,
or whatever that was called.
Or the Crosstown Knockout, one of the two.
Oh, yeah. That would have been a good one. That's a good idea. That's what they should have changed it to for that year.
Crosstown Knockout.
That's one of our honorable mentions. The second one out of the two honorable mentions is the 2010 NLDS with Cincinnati Reds playing the Philadelphia Phillies. Just kind of a brief background. The Reds finished first in NL Central. They won 91 games under Dusty Baker. They're coming in playing pretty decent baseball, and they play the Phillies, and the late, great Roy Halladay pitched a no-hitter in Game 1, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the series, really. They had errors. They blew a lead. They were shut out in Game 3, so they were swept, and it was essentially that as if they weren't even there after that first game. Once you get no hit in a playoff game, or you just get stifling defense upon you in a basketball game, or get shut out in a football game, it's tough to recover at any point during the playoffs. So the 2010 NLDS, the Reds get swept, get no hit, blew a lead, and got shut out again in Game 3. So I'm not going to speak any more on that, but that was pretty terrible outing for the Reds in the playoffs that year. So we're going to jump into our top 10. Number 10, Patrick's got this one.
Yeah, number 10. So let me go back to what you said real quick. Go
ahead.
Yeah. DS. And I just heard this from when I was listening to Chris Bussard, who is on Fox Sports, and he released a stat as the MLB was starting that Dusty Baker is the only coach to be fired from 3 different teams after having a 90-win season. San Francisco would be one of them. Cincinnati would be the other one. And I believe it was the Washington Nationals were the third. So he's the only coach in MLB history to win 90 games in a season and then get fired the following year. So just a little fun tidbit. Dusty Baker kind of has a little bit of bad luck running with him, but it looks like he got some of Cincinnati's bad luck too. So, but on to number 10. Number 10, FC Cincinnati, back in 2015. FC Cincinnati has been a huge success here in the Cincinnati area. Believe it or not, Cincinnati is a big soccer sports fan town, however you want to describe them. And they would actually sell out Nippert Stadium, which I believe holds around 30,000 people. They were playing in the Gold Cup, and in the Gold Cup, what happens is teams, minor league teams or whatever you want to call them, can go up against professional teams. So Cincinnati, this FC Cincinnati, huge underdog going into the Gold Cup. They rambled off 3 or 4 straight games against some professional teams. I believe this is the semifinal game held at Nippert Stadium, and they had a 1-0 halftime lead with a 31st minute goal. They then scored their second goal at the 61st minute. So 2-0 lead in a soccer game is a pretty substantial lead if we're talking in terms of soccer. However, it all kind of went to nothing in the 75th minute, where NY scored a goal and then turned around 3 minutes later, scored another goal, and then in overtime, they forced overtime, and in the 101st minute, edged out a victory 3-2 over FC Cincinnati to kind of kill their dreams of becoming Gold Cup champions. So they had it in the bag. They were playing great the whole game. I remember watching it and just sitting there with kind of what everybody calls the Cobra look, with your hands on top of your head and just staring at the TV, just shaking your head like, man, oh man, the Reds are cursed. The Bengals have cursed games. Xavier, Cincinnati, and you thought FC Cincinnati could be the one team that might be able to break the curse and get over the hump, and what do you know it, they got struck by it. So that is number 10, as FC Cincinnati is relatively new to this area, so we placed that one at number 10.
Welcome to FC Cincinnati, the top 10. So that's awful. Sucks to be them. But no, they actually only have one in the top 10, so good for them. I know they're on the up and up, and they're still waiting to hear about getting the MLS. But anyway, we jump to number 9. I'm going to talk about the 99 wild card playoff game with the Reds, so I'm back with the Reds. So this game was on October 4th, 1999, and it was at Synergy Field. It used to be called Riverfront. It was called Synergy for a little bit, and they got shut out, and they got 2 hit. It was 5-0. The Mets just beat up on them. And let me just throw a couple players out from each team that they had. This is how long ago it was. So the New York Mets had Ricky Henderson playing left field. They had John Allrood, the guy that wore the hard hat, playing first, that he's playing for the Blue Jays. Mike Piazza, Robin Ventura, Roger Cedeno, and Al Leiter pitching. And so those guys, I mean, if you're a baseball fan, you know those players. So that was on the Mets. And for the Reds, they had Pookie Reese, who was one of my all-time favorites. Barry Larkin, of course, one of the greats. Sean Casey, Greg Vaughn, Dimitri Young, Aaron Boone. So they had some good players as well. They won 96 games that year, and they come into that one game playoff, which they kind of put it on themselves there. They carried a 1-game lead over the Astros in the Central before that, and then a 2-game lead over the Mets for the wild card. Then they lost 3 out of the last 4, creating a tie for the wild card spot. So they kind of choked in the last 5 games or so of the regular season, ironically, because, Cincinnati sports teams do that. They choke under pressure, and that's why we even have this topic, this show going on right now. So number 9, 1999 wild card 1-game playoff. Reds get shut out by the New York Mets. Patrick, you got number 8.
Number 8, and this could have been where all the curse could have come from, because back in good old 1963, your Cincinnati Bearcats blew a 15-point lead to, and it's relevant to this day, Loyola Chicago, who was just in the Final Four. Congratulations to them as an 11 seed, and lost to them as national champions. So Loyola Chicago, national champions in 1963 over your Cincinnati Bearcats, in front of 20,000-plus fans at Freedom Hall. Significant about this, and to kind of add to the curse, you see with that 15-point lead, actually Loyola, we know them now as the Ramblers. Fun fact, back in 63, they were called the Chicagoans. So it was actually the Loyola Chicagoans and the Cincinnati Bearcats. However, the game was tied, went into overtime, and with 1 second left, a player from Chicago named Vic Rouse tipped in a shot to give them a 60-58 win with to give in the 25th NCAA tournament. So I believe if we can pinpoint where it all started, I mean, we're going back pretty far here, and 1963, we might be able to blame the Bearcats for starting the curse, but who knows? But that is definitely, especially in that day and age, no 3-point line. The 3-point line wasn't introduced until 1987. So to be able to blow a 15-point lead back in 1963, you're talking about a pretty substantial lead to kind of give up. So that is number 8.
I wonder if, that's number 8. I wonder if Sister Jean was at that game. No, in all seriousness. If she was, that's kind of funny, but if she wasn't, I'm okay with that.
I bet she is. And actually, let me throw another weird, and just because we're on Loyola, and Michigan, when they played Loyola, got induced to technical. Actually, I believe they got induced to technical in the national championship game. And sorry, I'm getting a little off tangent here. But the last time Michigan received a technical foul in a national championship game was when the Fab Five were in the national championship game, and Chris Webber called a timeout in the corner and got assessed a technical foul. So kind of ironic that the last time that Michigan was ever assessed a technical in the NCAA tournament was back when Chris Webber called that timeout in the corner and ultimately ended up losing the game for him. So sorry I got off on a tangent, but Loyola kind of brought that up. So number 8, Bearcats blowing a 15-point lead to Loyola. Chicago wins what we know as the Ramblers.
Thanks a lot, Ramblers. Jeez. You got number 7, right?
Yeah, and then this kind of segues right into number 7, and thanks again, the University of Cincinnati. People coming into this 2018 season said Mick Cronin had probably one of his most talented, disciplined teams that he's had ever at Cincinnati. So there was definitely high hopes. They ended up getting a 2 seed and playing Nevada in the second round. And UC ended up blowing a 22-point lead to lose to Nevada. There's nothing you can really say about it besides, it's 22 points, and I believe there was still that lead. They peaked their lead with about 13 minutes in the second half, and then it all just started to unfold. It just seemed like no shots would go down. Every call went against them. Just the wheels completely fell off. It literally looked like an uninterested, cursed team. And then 7A, Xavier turned around and did the same thing. They carried a 13-point lead as the number 1 seed against Kansas State in the second round, and they ultimately ended up losing that game in the final 7 minutes. And it just seems like they were both, when the ship started turning, both teams just kind of said it honestly looked like when I was watching both games, it was just kind of like a here we go again type thing, and it's got to be because they're from Cincinnati. So 7A and 7B, UC blowing a 22-point lead in the second round versus Nevada. Xavier blowing a 15-point lead to Kansas State.
That is wow.
Ruined my bracket.
Yeah.
Ruined my bracket.
Ruined a lot of brackets. Wow.
Yep.
That's just and unfortunately, for them too, that there was other issues with the tournament as far as upsets. That whole region that UC was in had the top 4 out. Miami, Florida, I think, got upset by Loyola in that one, and then just a bunch of other upsets. And fortunate enough for them that it was kind of hidden a little bit, but it'll always be in our mind because, we're Cincinnati fans, and we will never forget these things because these are not hard to that would be great to forget. But
yeah, and to add to Xavier's not only their first number 1 seed as a basketball team and to lose in the second round, they also then turned around weeks later and lost their head coach Chris Mack to the University of Louisville. So the gifts that keep on giving. Yeah,
they got punched in the mommy daddy button, and then they got punched in the face, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. But
exactly.
So number 6, I'm going back to baseball, and I'm going back to Dusty Baker and his teams. But the 2012 NLDS series against the San Francisco Giants. So it started off really well for the Reds. They go up 2-0. They win the first game 5-2, and they win the second game 9-0. It seemed like right then we all knew this is it. This is the time the Reds are going to break through. They're going to get a sweep. They're going to move on and go a little bit deeper in the playoffs. And then who knows, Dusty Baker could possibly still be here to this day. Some people hopefully didn't want that to happen. But so they go to game 3. It goes into extra inning. They get beat 2-1, close game. And then after that, it seemed like, hey, we're gonna lay down. Whatever happens bad is gonna happen. Game 4, Giants win. And by the way, the 3 games that the Giants ended up winning, Game 3, Game 4, and Game 5, were all at Cincinnati, and one game wasn't even close. It was 8-3 in Game 4. This got demolished. And by the time Game 5 came around, I'm probably speaking for every Cincinnati fan. Maybe I shouldn't, Cincinnati Reds fan, but they mentally, you have got to be like, wow, we just took the extra innings and lost at home, got smacked around at home, and now we got to play this 5th game. And how are we going to do it? And they get beat 6-4 in Game 5. There was a critical error. There was Matt Latos had some terrible pitching in that Game 5. A lot of bad things happened. So they get beat in 5 games when they were up 2-0 in the NLDS against the Giants. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Giants ended up winning the World Series that year. And that was just a bad time, of course, like we're going through here. That was number 6. And a lot of you are probably sitting here thinking, when are the Bengals coming into play? And don't worry, they're on their way.
Do not worry.
And if you're a Cincinnati fan at all that's listening, do not ever bet on them. Not saying that I've ever done that, but do not ever bet on them. And if you do happen to bet, go to our website. MyBookie is on there. That's one of our sponsors. Go ahead and click on MyBookie. Takes you right to their website. You can make all your bets there, but I would stay away from any Cincinnati team in any critical game at any point in time. Games that don't matter, don't do it. Games that matter, don't do it. Games that don't matter, do it, because it seems like they always show up in those games. But anyway, I digress.
Every time.
Exactly. So we're going to go number 5. Patrick's going to start out with this one. I'm going to come in a little bit later. So Patrick, go ahead. Number 5.
Number 5. So I think we both have personal stories for this one. And for number 5, I was actually at the game, and I can remember sitting there. We're going into the 4th quarter. The Bengals haven't scored. We've got A.J. McCarron as our quarterback. We had high hopes for him. It's kind of what Cincinnati fans were rallying for. They didn't want, Andy Dalton back there for whatever reason it may be. So we're going into the 4th quarter. It's starting to pour down rain. I'm sitting there in my poncho thinking, here we go again. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jeremy Hill, 1-yard run, makes it 15-7. Mike Nugent, with 5 minutes to go, kicks a field goal, 15-10. So people are in the stadium are kind of like, okay, we'll wait this one out. And you could kind of see, as time was ticking down, a couple fans were leaving here and there, but they were like, you know what, we might be in for a good one here. So with 1:50 to go, a 23-yard touchdown pass from A.J. McCarron to A.J. Green, A.J. to A.J., and the place erupts. I'm jumping up and down. Strangers around me are now my best friends. We're hugging. We're soaked. It's like the city has just come together, and this is gonna be our moment. This is gonna, after all the bad years of losing seasons, of bad losses that we'll probably get into in our top 5. This is it. We're up 16-15, 1:50 left, and we're taking this one home. Ben Roethlisberger comes out firing, making a couple completions here and there, and then boom, interception. And there's a minute, maybe less, on the clock, and all the Bengals have to do is run the clock out. That's it. They just got to run the clock out. And still, I'm going to sit there. I'm gonna sit there until I see this. It's 16-15. We've got A.J. McCarron, our backup quarterback, at the helm, ready to lead us over the Steelers, our Archtown rival in the NFL, to a victory. And all of a sudden, the curse hits. And he hands the football off, and Jeremy Hill fumbles it. And not only does Jeremy Hill fumble it, but on top of that, Adam Jones and Vontaze Burfict. So at the initial fumble, they were out of field goal range. So he fumbled the ball, and the Steelers were still going to have to make a couple plays to get to field goal range. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it was kind of one of those moments. Then, however, Steelers get the football back, play across the middle. Montez Burfict lights up Antonio Brown. He's flagged for 15 yards. Adam Jones comes in, bumps an official. He's flagged for 15 yards. Now we're at 14 seconds, 30 yards in penalties, puts him in field goal range. Sitting there, you could hear a pin drop in the stadium. I'm sitting there just soaked, angry, can't even express my feelings. Chris Boswell, 35-yard field goal. It's good, 18-16, and the curse lives on. And I couldn't even say anything when I left the stadium. I didn't know what to do. I just said, this is not real. This is not happening. I mean, we had the game. I think if you ever go on to ESPN and look at as the score fluctuates and the games go on, they put a percentage on how much they think the team's going to win. You know, if there's a 15-point basketball lead, it's 90% this team's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I would almost bet to say that the Bengals were 99.9% guaranteed to win the game after the interception, and that 0.01% chance, nailed
They knew it,
and they got
it.
They knew it.
ESPN knew it.
Knew it.
Oh my gosh. So I don't know if I would even call it a meltdown. I call it some kind of catastrophe because I'm listening to the game. I'm on my way to play an indoor softball game. There is such a thing, by the way, listeners. And I'm with my family. I'm listening to the game. I'm getting excited. They're coming back, like Patrick mentioned. We get to the facility. I run, and everyone's watching the TVs. They stop the game. We're all watching it. They score. Everybody goes nuts when they take the lead. I run outside. I go get my things because I run right in. They're still outside getting their things, bringing the stuff in. I run outside. As that's happening, all the things that negatively happened that Patrick mentioned have transpired. And I call my buddy. I'm like, they did it. And he goes, oh, you haven't watched the last minute, have you? And I go, what are you talking about? As I'm grabbing my gear, getting out of the car, I'm still not back inside yet. I walk back inside, and everyone is screaming, saying some choice words that I can't say on here. And I'm looking at the TV, and the fumble happened, the two hits, bumping the official and the hit on Antonio Brown, and I was heartbroken. Oh, my God. I was so mad for the rest of the night. I didn't say a word to anybody. It was very, very bad time, and I would consider that probably being my personal, number one Cincinnati fan bummer, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even put emotions to it. I mean, being at the game and even hearing your story, and you were saying you were mad not talking to people, and I didn't even know what to say. I didn't know to be mad, to be upset, to fire Marvin Lewis or what. I mean, it was almost just like it was bound to happen. There was just nothing that we could do about it. It didn't matter who was out on the field. We could have had the greatest of the greatest, and it was just, it was just bound to happen. So
yeah, no words. Let's move on before I start crying. So number 4 is back to the Bengals, and 2006, January 8th, Bengals versus Steelers at home with that just prolific offense that was just clicking that year. Chris Henry, Chris Perry, Rudy Johnson, Chad Johnson, or Ochocinco at the time maybe, TJ, Palmer. They had a great offensive line. Everything was clicking, and so I'm going to tell my part of the story, and then I know Patrick has some words as well. So Bengals have the ball. Palmer steps back to pass, and I'm in my college dorm room by myself because everyone else is either a Colts or a Steelers fan, and I have my Bengals blanket on me. I'm watching on the edge of my couch. He throws a deep pass in the air. I stand up. I see Chris Henry catch it. I'm going ballistic, screaming, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden they turn the camera and they show Palmer grabbing his knee, and I sit back down. And kind of like what you did at the game, you just said no words. I sat down and I'm like, I had to pinch myself. Is this really happening? because they were so good that year. It was the first time ever in maybe decades that they were a proven team and ready to rock and roll, and Palmer was excellent that year, and he tears his ACL because some D lineman decided to take his knee out, and that's kind of where that started with that rule. But he completes a 66-yard completion to Henry, and then John Kitna comes in. No offense to John Kitna, but he couldn't do the job, and they lost 31-17. And then, of course, the Steelers, who are rivals of the Bengals, go and win the Super Bowl against, I believe, the Seattle Seahawks that year, who had Shaun Alexander, who's actually from the Cincinnati area, so he got cursed too because he was from Cincinnati. So,
right. Yeah, if you have any affiliation with Cincinnati, and you move on to another team, it's almost a coin flip. You're taking some of the curse with you, so just understand that. If there's any aspiring professional athletes or professional athletes listening to our show. So my story goes back, and the reason I'm at all these games is, again, I'm at this game. I'm with my mother, and we've had season tickets for quite some time. My grandmother has had season tickets. Dad's grandmother has also had season tickets. So plenty of tickets to go around, which is how I'm ending up at all these games. And like Josh had explained, Carson Palmer drops back, first play of the game, and launches at 66 yards. And every fan stands up, yells. It was almost like they knew it was going to be complete. Pre-celebration, Chris Henry's just basket catch, waiting, catches it. The crowd erupts for about 10 yards of his run. So he probably gets 20 yards or so from the end zone. Complete silence through the stadium. And everybody looks back towards the goal line, and there's Carson Palmer laying on the ground. Nobody really celebrated Chris Henry's touchdown. There was a few, but I mean, literally, it was a dead struck, just silence in the stadium. It was just something that I couldn't even, again, put in words. It was just like, you have got to be kidding me. I was like, there's no, hopefully he twisted his ankle or something. And then when they had to cart him off the field and John Kitna was warming up, I knew from, even if they had a 7, 14, 20-point lead, I knew that the Steelers were going to end up somehow winning this game. Kemon von Ohlenhoffen was the player who landed on his leg. He has come out numerous amount of times and said that it was not an intentional hit. It was not a dirty play.
You're right.
It was not a dirty play. Shockingly enough, people believed him. Yeah, people did believe him just for the sheer fact that he did play for the Bengals for in the 94 season to the 99 season, before then moving on to the Steelers to when this happened. So, like I said, when you leave, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And this is just one of those things where this didn't just affect Cincinnati in that game. It affected Cincinnati's future, because this was a core group of guys that were supposed to win multiple, well, at least that was what us Cincinnati fans had hoped, multiple Super Bowls. I mean, we honestly thought that this was our shot from back in the late 80s to run off a couple Super Bowl, maybe 2-3 Super Bowl appearances, like you said, with Rudy Johnson, Chad Johnson, T.J. Hushmanzada, Chris Henry, all these guys. I mean, they had every single weapon, and they had the defense to go with it. Their defense, I think, in the ratings was in the top 10, top 15. Their offense, I believe, at one point throughout the season was the number one most efficient offense in the NFL. And just being at that game, I almost feel like I shouldn't go to games that matter anymore for Cincinnati, at least for the Bengals, because they don't pan out very well. So that's my story, and I honestly don't think I stayed for the rest of the game. I think I stayed until halftime and couldn't bear to watch anymore, because ultimately I knew what was going to happen. I didn't know what the score was going to be, but oh boy. Welcome to Cincinnati.
Exactly. And hopefully we still have some listeners, because they're probably either upset and crying or pissed off, and they said, I'm not listening to this anymore, but we just got through number 4. We got 3 left. I'll go with number 3. This goes back to UC men's basketball. Kenyon Martin in the year 2000 breaks his leg. He was the National Player of the Year, Conference USA Player of the Year at the time. Cincinnati was ranked number 1, breaks his leg in the Conference USA tourney. First game, about 3 minutes into the game against St. Louis, they get beat, and they find out he has a broken leg. Obviously, he's out for the rest of the season, which is the NCAA tournament. When that year, and I was a huge UC men's basketball fan. Bob Huggins was my guy. I liked a lot of their players. And I seriously, when I heard that, I was a senior or junior in high school at that time, and that tells you how old I am. And I heard that he broke his leg, and I'm not joking, I had to go to the bathroom because I did not know how I was going to react in front of my friends, because I didn't want to. I came back with some red eyes, and I'm not going to tell them how I got that. I said I had to rub them too much, but I'm serious. I'm pretty sure I did shed some tears that day because of that, because Kenyon Martin was probably my favorite UC player of all time, watching at least. I didn't know Oscar Robertson, but so he breaks his leg. They go from ranking number 1, they end up getting a number 2 seed in the tournament, and add insult to injury, they lose in the second round to Tulsa on some ridiculous shot, if I remember correctly, in the corner, and they lose and they're done. And that's how the season ends. So in early March, they had the Conference USA tournament. They lose him. They has his leg broken, and then loses that first round game. They get put as a number 2 seed, and they get beat by Tulsa in the second round, and that's it. That's all she wrote, folks. Kenyon Martin's basically career's over. He ends up getting drafted number 1 by the Brooklyn Nets, and then that's all she wrote. But kind of a terrible time for UC basketball. They've been really good for so long, and then this happens, and I mean that's just the start. So that's the year 2000, 99, the Reds, the 1-game playoff we talked about. Then the year 2000, this, and then years later some other things happen. It's just, and I'm sure we missed some things, but these are our top 10, and that was number 3. So number 3, Kenyon Martin breaks his leg in the Conference USA tournament, and UC loses in the second round of Tulsa. So, Patrick, number 2.
Moving on to number 2, and for all of you that thought we forgot about the UC Bearcats football team, we certainly did not, because they also are cursed by Cincinnati. Back in 2009, now head coach at Notre Dame, I think Josh can confirm that, Brian
Absolutely.
Kelly. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes, sir.
So Brian Kelly, the head coach at University of Cincinnati at the time in 2009, led your Cincinnati Bearcats to a perfect 12-0 record, and they were ranked number 2 at the time. To be able to bump them, so college football analysts came out, they gave a scenario, basically broke it down, and it came down to 1 game. UC was done playing. They were kind of seeing how the cards were going to unfold in the college football world, and back then, if people remember, it was BCS national championship, so you had to finish in the top 2, the number 1 and number 2 team. Whoever finished at the end of the regular season would then go on to play in the BCS national championship game. So it all came down to, after crunching numbers, Cincinnati needed a Nebraska win over Texas, to secure their spot in the BCS national title game. Nebraska defeating Texas would have had Cincinnati jump Texas to be slotted in that number 2 spot, and then go to the BCS national championship game. Again, they were ranked number 3 at this time, and ironically enough, the Cincinnati curse comes into play. The game unfolds. Texas ends up winning on a last-second field goal as time expires against Nebraska. Funny how, some of these on our top 10 are last-second shots. The Bearcats in 63 lose the national championship on a last-second shot. Now we go to here, and it doesn't even involve Cincinnati, but somehow last-second field goal, Texas wins. The Bearcats stay at that number 3 ranking. due to Texas win. And as we all know, kind of how it unfolded from there. They went on to play Florida in the Sugar Bowl, and Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer, who was probably one of the best teams. Well, I think Tim Tebow is one of the best college football players we've ever seen all time with the numbers that he put up at Florida. But they ended up losing in pretty much a butt whooping, 51-24 to Florida in the Sugar Bowl. So don't worry, we got you. UC Bearcats football, you're in there. So if Xavier had a football team around this time, I believe somehow, some way, they would have made our top 10. But Bearcats football, you're number 2. So and now, drum roll, and Josh is going to take it away for our number 1 moments in Cincinnati sports history.
Oh, man, number 1. And as everyone sitting there listening to all these terrible moments, kind of a negative show, really, and kind of disturbing in my opinion, but we have number 1. You have to know this. If you're any kind of Cincinnati fan, you've heard this before. You've seen it on TV several times. Number 1 is Super Bowl 23. And it's not just one thing, one action. It's multiple things. So let me break it down for you. To begin the game, before the game, the night before, fullback Stanley Wilson has a relapse of cocaine addiction and gets caught with cocaine and gets arrested. And that kind of sets on the eve of Super Bowl for Super Bowl 23 down in Joe Robbie Stadium in Miami. And so they hear that, and actually kind of a, not really a funny story, but kind of a weird story. Chris Collinsworth, I've heard it several times from different people reading and listening. Chris Collinsworth, during one of the little times for the players to talk before the game, he said, "Let's win this one for Stanley." And I mean, as a teammate, I'm already upset at Stanley for, first of all, I'm upset at Stanley for going back and getting into that those drugs. But also, where was he? Why wasn't he with someone? Why didn't he get back to his curfew if there was one? But for Chris Collinsworth to say that, I'm like, why would we want to do that for him? Why would we do it for us? Because we're clean, we're fine, we're the ones that dedicated ourselves and didn't go out and do something stupid. But so that's the two things. But the main thing is this essentially. So the Bengals were up in the fourth quarter, 13-6. And they end up getting outscored by the 49ers in the fourth quarter, 14-3, and lose on January 22nd, 1989, to the 49ers with Bill Walsh, who, by the way, was from Cincinnati under Sam Weish, and Sam Weish was coaching against him, and who had Joe Montana and Jerry Rice, who obviously are Hall of Famers, but the throw wasn't to Jerry Rice. The throw was to John Taylor with less than so they had the ball with less than 3 minutes left, and essentially Joe Montana and Joe Cool drove down the field and took it to the house. They passed 10-yard pass to John Taylor over the middle with 34 seconds left, put the nail in the coffin to make the final score 20-16, and that, my folks, is number 1 on our list of worst times as a Cincinnati fan, a Cincinnati sports fan. So to kind of recap really quickly, we had 2 honorable mentions that we're not going to go over again, but we had number 10, FC Cincinnati, loses to New York Red Bull. We had number 9, the 99 National League wildcard one-game playoff against the Mets. Number 8, Bearcats blow 15-point lead back in 1963. Sister Jean played the point guard for Loyola Chicago. I'm just kidding about that. Sister Jean's a great person. She's a great person. She's a great person. She's a great person. Number 7 and 7A, we had UC this year lose a 22-point lead men's basketball team. Lose a 22-point lead and lost in the second round to Nevada. Xavier, who was a number 1 seed, lost in the second round as well. So both Cincinnati teams losing as high seeds in the tournament this year. Number 6, the 2012 NLDS, and essentially they just didn't come to play. They didn't come to play at all, and they lost 3-2 to the Giants after being up 2-0. Number 5, the Bengals meltdown in 2015-2016 playoffs. Jeremy Hill fumble and then the 2 penalties on the defensive players. Number 4, Carson Palmer back in 2006, torn ACL pass to Chris Henry to begin the game or close to the beginning of the game. Number 3, Kenyon Martin breaking his leg in the Conference USA tournament when ranking number 1, and they go to a number 2 seed in the March Madness tournament and losing the second round. Number 2, Patrick mentioned the 2009 UC Bearcats team goes in to play University of Florida against Team Tim Tebow, and those guys and get leveled 51-24. And the one I just mentioned, number 1, Joe Montana to John Taylor with less than a minute to go in Super Bowl 23 in Miami, Florida, and that's when Stanley Wilson had a relapse in cocaine addiction and got arrested there. So all the worst times that we could think of in Cincinnati sports fan history. There we go. That's the show. Patrick, do you have anything else to say?
I just pray that in my next 30 years, I turn 29 here next week, then in my next 31 years that we can't come up with a top 20 list. I hope we can keep it at 10. And a couple honorable mentions. Hopefully our luck here in Cincinnati starts to turn around here in the next 30 years.
I hope we can have a top 10 of greatest moments in these next 30 years. First of all, I hope I'm still alive in the next 30 years, but the fact to have a show of the top 10 greatest times so people forget about these and through these terrible times. So definitely.
Just one championship in my lifetime. I just want one. Just one.
I'll take it. I'll take one. I'll definitely take one. Who would you take, though? Yep. Any of the sports, or does it have to be a certain team?
Man, I think I'd have to go Super Bowl. I want to see a Super Bowl here in Cincinnati. We've never had one. I want one. The Reds have had World Series championships. Granted, it'd be probably equally as awesome and amazing to see the Reds win a World Series, but I want that Super Bowl, man. I want to see it.
I'm with you. It's got to be a Super Bowl. That's the end of the story. That's it. Great show, Patrick. Good job today. Just a reminder to our listeners out there, go to our website, thegruelingtruth.net, and click on our show, Real Deal, and you can listen to our shows anytime you like. Plus, there are tons of other great shows going on our website as well that aren't us. You can take some time to listen to those as well. But like I said before, we're on tons of different media outlets, and I won't reiterate those, but I will reiterate our social media accounts at CoachJB4 for myself, Patrick at Miller_Patrick4 for Twitter, and also our Real Deal Twitter page at Real Deal TGT. And, of course, you can find us on Facebook by searching our names for Real Deal. That's the show, folks. Thanks for listening. I know it was a tough one to get through because of all the negativity, but we really appreciate you listening. We appreciate my bookie for being our sponsor. Good times. Love talking sports, even if sometimes it could be a negative, but we're here. We love doing it, and so that concludes our show. For my co-host, Patrick Miller, I'm Josh Benjamin. Thanks for listening again to our show, Real Deal, on the Grueling Truth. Until next time, be real with what you say.